Reid and then Michael for the order.
Cool.
Let me check my settings real fast. Yeah. Cool. All right. Here we go. In 3, 2, 1. And welcome to episode 460 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with
Reid Ramsey.
Michael O'Malley.
In today's episode, we're going to be talking about movies that we saw this week in part 1. And in part 2, we're going to continue our David Cronenberg series with 1991's Naked Lunch. Which, it'll be... Not really sure how that conversation is going to go. We luckily had some pre-recording reading from Michael from the novel Naked Lunch, and so I feel like we're ready to tackle this.
Yeah, I can tell you 2 things wrong with that title.
Let's go ahead and jump into movies that we saw this week. Reid, I know you caught this as well, but if you weren't, I don't know. You either were seeing a Taylor Swift movie or you were seeing this movie, Killers of the Flower Moon, this past weekend. At least if you went to the theater that I went to. Killers of the Flower Moon, it's based off of the novel of the same name. But this is the latest film from director Martin Scorsese. It stars, longtime Scorsese stalwarts. This is the first time that De Niro and DiCaprio, though, have been in the same movie, correct? I think so.
Yeah,
maybe.
I think so. But yeah, Leo DiCaprio, Robert De Niro, Lily Gladstone, for those who probably most familiar with her in She.
Certain Women?
What's the Kelly? Yeah, the Certain Women, the Kelly Reichardt movie. But it also has a number of other actors. Jesse Plemons, Brendan Fraser pops up briefly. Jason Isbell has like a prominent, long role in this movie, which was
really?
I couldn't tell. I'm not super familiar what Jason Isbell looks like, and I was like, that dude looks familiar until the end of the movie, and then I was like, it's Jason Isbell?
Did I hear that Sturgill Simpson is in it too?
He's also.
They just got all the alt country guys just to show up.
Yeah,
Yep.
Sturgill Simpson plays like this rodeo man who works with Robert De Niro's character for a while.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jason Isbell has a relatively prominent role. For those unfamiliar with the story, when oil is discovered in 1920s Oklahoma under Osage Nation land, the Osage people are murdered one by one until the FBI steps in to unravel the mystery, which is a very short log line for a 3.5-hour movie, because a lot of stuff happens within that. I don't know. Scorsese, he's been on a tear. I mean, most of his career is pretty awesome, pretty great. But he's been on a tear recently with, probably for me, probably starting with Shutter Island, just hit after hit after hit. This one though, Reid, I don't know how you felt. This was one, while I was watching it, it never really fully. I felt like I was wanting something more. And then it ended, and the ending, worked. I understood. But it's been one that's kind of grown on me ever since. And I've read a bunch of, really strong writing about it. And it's definitely one that I want to revisit because I think it's one that you on first pass, I don't feel like you're going to capture all the machinations that are at work in this thing. I think you kind of have to understand the flow of the narrative and then go in and really sit down and kind of study what's going on, because Scorsese's doing kind of a lot behind the facade of the narrative that you're seeing. There's a lot going on in the background that is really clever and really and really kind of, I think that's really the meat of this movie that really works. But I really liked it. Like I said, it's just been one that I've been thinking about ever since I saw it. What were your impressions of the movie?
No, I'm right right with you. I was pretty much blown away. I do think, to speak to your point though, it's kind of one of his quieter movies, I think,
Mhm.
even compared to some of his more recent stuff. Like The Irishman is a fairly quiet movie for being a mob movie. Silence is like kind of a prolonged, like meditative film at times, but like this one for some
Mhm.
reason just feels like there he's just slowly letting the horror of the situation kind of wash over the audience.
Yeah.
And so like you don't really feel it hit you until, well, like I don't know, it's heavy at the start, like immediately the film is heavy,
Yeah.
but I feel like you don't get kind of the full culmination of it till closer to the end, which I think the ending is one of his best endings of a film. I don't want to like speak to it here because it's only
Yeah.
been out
Well,
less than a week, but
no, I think you make a good point though, because yeah, it is. The Irishman is pretty quiet, but like it kind of lulls you into the whole thing by utilizing like the Scorsese mob stuff.
yeah.
Evoking Goodfellas and Casino and Mean Streets and stuff like that. Like it brings that in with you, and so you're just kind of like, oh, like this is it's a Scorsese mob movie, and then I think it has like the whole third act that just kind of punches you in the gut and you just kind of are like winded the rest of the movie. And yeah, Silence is just very meditative, so you're very much like on this specific level register the entire time, and I think you kind of
Hmm.
understand to a degree what's going on. But yeah, this one is quiet, and it's operating. I think what's maybe so unfamiliar about it is that it's operating on a lot of it's evoking a lot of like Western tropes,
Yeah.
and that's not something that Scorsese's really done ever. And
Right.
so like I think he's working in a language that you're not as familiar with, and so like there's not necessarily stuff in the like moments in the movie outside of like montage moments that really feel like it's evoking like a Scorsese movie, and I think that's maybe where the disconnect comes from.
Yeah, and I think to an extent too, like it feel so I read the book is really good too, but the book is pretty different and it's like frame looking at the
Mhm.
events. And which I've also heard that like there's a novelization from like an actual Osage writer that is like all obviously then different as well. So like there's different levels to it, but basically the book really uses the story of the creation of the FBI to kind of guide the
Mhm.
story of the murders and like as an in basically into the story. And then I think I read that like they started that with the script for this movie. They started there similar to the book, and then when talking to like actual Osage people, the people were like, this doesn't really feel like the correct way to like get into the story. Like it doesn't feel like the most true part to the story. And so then I think from there it kind of turns into like Scorsese saw the main end for this movie is actually the marriage between Leonardo DiCaprio's character and Lily Gladstone's.
Mhm.
And like their romance, lack of romance, however you want to look at it, like their story is like very central. So even though there's all these crime elements going on, there's Western elements, true crime, there's kind of the historical aspect, but then it seems very grounded in just their relationship. And I'm not sure, at least in one of his crime movies, I'm not sure Scorsese's done something quite like this. Like, relationships have always been important, but he's never, frankly, had a character as central to the story in like that opposite role like Lily Gladstone is to Leo here.
Yeah, she's exceptional. I know that's what a lot of people have been pointing out. She's exceptional in this movie.
Hmm.
She does a lot of face acting, a lot of eye acting.
Yeah.
A lot of like she doesn't say a lot, but she's also saying a bunch. Just in like how, like the final scene between her and Leo, like there's those two characters, like just hardly any words. It's all her just kind of
Hmm.
talking with her eyes. It's incredible. Um, but yeah, I mean, you have kind of crime mob elements, like the Robert De
Yeah.
Niro character. Very much like you could see a version of him, like he feels like a version of like his character in Goodfellas or something. Like, but
Yeah.
it doesn't really have like the style or flash. Like Scorsese will utilize montage, but more to like he utilizes it a lot in the first part of the movie when he's like illustrating the Osage Nation as well, like and how they accumulated the wealth coming from the oil boom, and
Right.
like how that's developing the town and how the white settlers are coming around that town. Like he utilizes a lot of montage there to kind of speed that part up. Um, but like in terms of like the crime, it's like the crimes and such itself, it doesn't really it doesn't have that like that thing that I think a lot of people point at as that people have problems with. Whether I mean it can be a crime movie like a Goodfellas or something like that, but also like even like Wolf of Wall Street. Like there's
Yeah.
something almost like gleeful and fun and exciting just because of the way he just cuts a montage to like the
Hmm.
crime being done, and so like Jordan Belfort's doing something deeply nefarious and wrong in Wolf of Wall Street, but like you're having a good time during it because like the way that Thelma Schoonmaker and Scorsese like cut it, it feels like something like really like it's just lively and entertaining. It's just like good cinematic language, just kind of like working on you exactly like it wants to, and he never utilizes that really here. And that like and I don't know. I don't want to get. I know, Michael, you're going to see it later this week, and I'm sure we'll talk about it again. Um, but I feel like, so I don't want to get too deep into it. But at the same time, the one thing, the kind of stray thought that I have is that it's working a lot against, and I've read some writing on this. It's working against, and this is why I think you need a second viewing. Also, is it's working against how you perceive. Um, not just like like American West stories, but just kind of like how you perceive like what like who is the hero, who is the villain, you know. I apologize for like the very baseless you know referral, but like cowboys and Indians, like it's constantly playing with like that, like
Yeah.
how you view like cowboys and Indians and like you know John Wayne westerns, even what just westerns from that time, like just kind of that basic dichotomy. It's like manipulating you with how you view that, even though at no point I feel like is the movie endorsing a character like the Leo character. I don't think it's ever endorsing that character. Like it's going, this guy's a bumbling idiot from like
Yeah.
the second he comes on screen. Um, there's always kind of a sinisterness to the Robert De Niro character that, but because like we're so, because we're so conditioned from watching not only just like old westerns, but just like a lot of Americans, movies that kind of share that similar structure. I think that's where it's working on a different register because it's really playing against that, and you're kind of, and it's saying a lot about the Osage Nation and the people and things like that, but it's all doing it in like this kind of background to the actual action that I think it's paying attention to the people in the background when you think that the foreground people are the most important.
No, I 100% agree. And I think so early on in the movie, this isn't really a spoiler, but early on in the movie, Leonardo DiCaprio's character Ernest is reading a book about the Osage people, and like there's like a little spot where it has a picture, and there's a little caption on the picture that says, "Can you spot the wolves in this picture?"
Hmm.
And it's such like a classic, I don't know, it's such like a classic mystery setup that could have gone that way, and the movie does not play like a mystery at all. Like basically kind of what you're saying, black and white, like who's the good guy, who's the bad guy from like minute one essentially. So even though you feel like it could play into that mystery aspect, it's not. It's saying like this is what is going on and like
Hmm.
the horrors that are happening and the people that are committing them. And
Hmm.
like you're saying, the people in the foreground are not as important because we know we're not like being led to empathize with them, just like have the rug pulled out under us later that like, oh, they are murderers and horrible people. No, it's like we know early on what these people are plotting, what they're doing. And I think like
Yeah, there's not. I read what one person who had like read the book. Also, there's not in there like there's it lacks like the mystery of the book, and you're like, yeah, but I think that's the point. Like, there's not
Yeah,
supposed to be a lot of
100%.
mystery. Like, who's doing it, and you
Right.
have to kind of reckon with that. It's a the it reminds me a little bit on that register of a movie that Andrew and I caught at TIFF, The Zone of Interest, which is very much more this on a much more experimental avant-garde level, where the central characters of the story is the commandant of Auschwitz and his family, and for the entirety of the movie, you're watching like this family, literally live, just basic days, spending time in the garden, doing chores, like going to work. Like there's just kind of like this like Andrew and I described it as like it's like Jean Dielman, in front of a
Mhm.
concentration camp, which is a very rough way of portraying it, but it kind of is that way. And that's like they're not the central, like they're not the important characters of the movie. Constantly in the background, you're hearing screams, you're seeing smoke, you're seeing like fire from the smokestacks and stuff like the most horrific horrors ever are happening behind them, but like you know they're like kind of shielding themselves and like compartmentalizing to like just evil levels of like what's going on around them. And there's a degree of that in this where it's just like all of this just heinous, just horrible, these horrible acts by humans are happening. Um, but Scorsese, again, like this is as experimental or avant-garde as Zone of Interest. He very much brings that to the forefront. So yeah, like I think a lot of people will come into this and be like, I didn't like it because you didn't get like this kind of murder mystery, like, oh, he's keeping me on my toes. He's not trying to keep you on your toes.
No,
He's indicting these people. From
right.
I saw a really good review that kind of said this is like Scorsese working in a Spike Lee register, where Spike Lee
Mhm.
is like never. He's not very like he's not hidden with his message. He's very like
No.
upfront and going like these motherfuckers did it kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, like that's, and so this is kind of, I think Scorsese has done, crime movies where he's very much indicted the people involved, but he's done it with this kind of style that, again, like I said before, like you're having a fun time while also recognizing these are
Yeah.
horrible people. And yeah, this is kind of like a Spike Lee movie. He's like, these people are horrible, and we're not going to cover that up. You're going to have to live with that for 3.5 hours. So, Killers of the Flower Moon, highly recommend checking it out. Honestly, talking about it now like makes me want to go check it out, go see it again, and I probably will at some point soon.
Yeah.
But yeah, Michael sat there quietly this whole time, so I'm going to toss it over to him to talk about The Exorcist.
A different movie. Yeah, not the first Exorcist, not the one that just came out, but I watched The Exorcist 3, which is on Criterion Channel as part of their 90s horror little lineup that they've got running this month. And this one was super good. I had put it off for a while because obviously the original Exorcist is really good. And then I watched the second one, and the second one sucks. It's stupid and doesn't make sense. And I don't know, like Reagan is in a laboratory for some reason. I don't know. But with the third one, William Blatty, the guy who wrote the first Exorcist, both the novel and then the screenplay for the film, he's actually directing it, and he wrote the screenplay as well. So, like, even more so than the original, which I think a lot of people, really attribute to, as like a directorial vision. This one is like almost like an auteurist endeavor, and it is basically set 15 years after the original Exorcist, and they kind of ignore the events of The Exorcist 2, although I guess they're still canon. But it involves like George C. Scott is this police who is investigating the serial killer known as the Gemini Killer, and as he's investigating the serial killer, he becomes more and more aware of the fact that like the serial killer is in some way like either channeling or possessed by a supernatural entity. And the movie kind of goes from there. It's like this George C. Scott's journey into hell, in which as he's investigating these murders that happen, he's always like one step behind this like supernatural creature. It's a little bit like Seven, to be honest, in the sense of that like foreboding sense of doom and nihilism. You know, this feeling that like this horrible violence is, you know, unstoppable and is done by this purely malevolent force. And I thought it was really good. It's super spooky, and it's oftentimes like at the edges of like surrealism. There's a lot of like dreams and visions and stuff, which makes sense. I've seen Blatty's first movie that he directed, which is called The Ninth Configuration. And that movie is just like a complete fever dream set in like a insane asylum. Whereas this one makes a lot more sense, but it's got that same sort of like reality is crumbling around, like the reality of the movie is constantly like, you know, at a threat of like collapsing in front of you. And there's some really effective scares. There's some places that get really cosmic at times. The killer is played by Brad Dourif. How do you say his name? Chucky. He's played by that guy who's in this. And but eventually he's like possessing one of the original priests from the first Exorcist. But there's also like a long sequence in which like he is like possessing different people in a hospital. And that's really freaky. There's one really good scare in the hospital. It's not like a really big jump scare movie, but there's a big jump scare in the hospital that is really good and really cleverly done. One of the kind of conceits of the movie is that the killer like drains the blood out of everyone and like chops their head off, but only after the blood has been drained. So there's not a lot of like, it looks like mysteriously like a bloodless crime, even though it's super grisly. And so the movie plays a lot with like blades and these big old like garden chopping scissors, and but in ways that are really unsettling rather than just kind of splatterhouse. I don't know, like it like verges up on like art house stuff at times. Like there are times in which it feels like Lynchian or something like that in terms of like how it's doing like stuff. Anyway, it's really good. And if anyone is like me and was kind of turned off by The Exorcist 2 being bad, I would definitely recommend it to people. It's on Criterion. I don't know how long it'll be there. It's definitely through the end of October, but past that, I'm not sure.
It looks like for those who don't have Criterion, it's on honestly top tier streaming service Tubi.
Tubi is good. Tubi. And I will say, like, I feel like this movie's been memory hold, or if not memory hold, just like lost in the shuffle of horror film like franchises. Because I mean, The Exorcist is one of the big ones, and there's like a new one that comes out every decade or so. And I guess at this point, there's just been enough of them that like people, and there's been enough that have been kind of mediocre that people just assume that all of them are bad. But this is like a diamond in the rough for sure. I feel like it's always interesting running horror film franchises because you'll oftentimes find like deep in the weeds, like just some really charming or like interesting stuff. But most of these franchises are most bad. So to find one that's like not just like good for a horror sequel, but like genuinely good. And Exorcist 3, it's the real deal.
I also like that when I was looking it up that famous New York Knicks basketball player Patrick Ewing plays the Angel of Death.
Oh my God. Is that who that was?
Yeah, I was just amazing. I was like, why is Patrick Ewing in this movie?
There's actually an amazing scene there's like a dream sequence with a bunch of angels that's really amazing. Anyway, it's really good. The Ninth Configuration, William Blatty's first movie that he directed, is really good too. And they both have this kind of like unsteady reality feeling to them, much more so in the Ninth Configuration. But yeah, we're good.
Nice. Reid, I'm gonna take us home by tossing it over to you.
Cool. I went to the Brooklyn Horror Film Festival last week and caught several movies. Not as many as maybe I'd like to, but a few. And the one I want to talk about is called Wilder Than Her. Main reason I want to talk about it is I hope it actually gets like a little bit of a release. Like I feel like this would be a really nice little streaming find. But basically, the idea is that a group of female friends, there's three of them, months after one of their friends has like kind of mysteriously died, go on their same like annual trip where they go on this hiking trip alone, like in the woods, and camp for a few days. And it's set up to be very similar to like kind of what you might expect from like Blair Witch or like Alone in the Woods at Night movies, stuff like that. But it has like a lot more interesting stuff going on than like a movie just remaking Blair Witch or something like that. Like there's a lot more to this one. And it's primarily just about like the friendship of these characters. But I found it to be really funny and charming. And also quite scary because it's about the horrors of friendship, if that makes sense. Like that sounds so corny, honestly, but it is like about the horrors of like what happens when like your friend group's falling apart and you don't trust each other anymore. And like like what happens when you feel alone even when you're with your friends, stuff like that. And it was just like a really fun movie, and it's very, very funny, but still had like a lot of good thrills. The cast also was really good. I didn't think I was familiar with many of the people before, but Sunita Mani is in it, who has appeared in a lot of stuff, but was, I think, most known for being in Glow, the TV show. I have not seen Glow,
Oh, okay.
but that looks like her most well-known role. And then also there's like a side character appearance from Danny DeFerrari, who I didn't know but was really, really funny. And then I looked it up afterwards, and he plays the sugar daddy in Shiva Baby. If y'all saw Shiva Baby, he
Oh,
plays
really?
like the sugar daddy in that movie. So he's just like, he was very, very funny in this movie, and he's playing like kind of a bit of like a granola himbo essentially, and it's very funny. But I don't want to say a lot more else because it's not going to probably be out for quite a while. But if it hits streaming, definitely worth checking out. And then worth keeping an eye on this director too. Jessica Kozak is the director. It's her debut feature. But there's clearly like a decent bit of funding behind this. Like the production value is high, and it's very entertaining. So I hope it has a little bit of life on streaming. That's Wilder Than Her.
Very cool. Yeah. All right. Well, we're gonna go and we're gonna go get high, take a break and get high on bug poisons and such, and we'll be back with a very, very enlightening part 2 as we talk about 1991's Naked Lunch after this.
This was all of our first times watching Naked Lunch, right?
Yeah.
What a trip.
I feel like I've seen a lot of Cronenberg, like enough to know what I was getting into, and yet I still had no clue what I was getting into with this one.
Yeah, I even read the book thinking like, oh, this will help me.
Yeah, I kind of just was like, we'll see what happens.
You just got to ride with it.
Well, I was looking for a way to watch it, and then Michael was like, "Hey, we should you should go to effed up movies. You know, that's been a big winner for us. And this movie, I guess, is not effed up enough because it wasn't on there. They had Night of the Living Dead, which is, I mean, a great movie. I don't know what classify it as effed up, but they didn't have Naked Lunch.
Yeah, the question, not effed up enough or too effed up?
Yeah, we should just do that for every movie now that we review on the podcast. We should be like, is this effed up enough for effed up movies? And
Is this a
I thought for sure
website?
you were gonna go through 1 2 3 movies. That's your other standby.
that's a good one too. No, no, for what was it? We watched Sallow and
Pink
I watched
Flamingos
Pink
was on
Flamingos, yeah,
effed up movies
on
for sure.
ffupmovies.com.
So one of my biggest failings as like a movie person is I have no idea how to like actually pirate shit. Like I can't do it, but like 1 2 3 movies, shit like that.
Yeah.
That is canon for me. That goes back like
Hey.
12
Yeah,
to
God bless
15
1 2
years.
3 movie.
Hey, if you want to go check out effed up movies, it's great. Get all your effed up movies. Like I said, Night of the Living Dead. Let's come pop over there real quick and all.
See some effed up movies.
Yeah. Like
I'm
I'm just
shocked
looking at
this one
the
is not there.
at the front page.
It's probably a cop. Like it says there's a major studio label on it, so it's probably a bit more policed.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Was
just
your Internet Archive stream pretty good?
yeah, it was real good.
Okay, because I watched it on the Criterion Blu-ray, which looked amazing.
Yeah. No, I don't know where they pulled the archive.org stream, but it was good.
I got a
Yeah, I got some
free trial
questions.
for Cinemax. That's how I watched
Yeah,
it.
see, I didn't want to do that.
That's fair.
I got some questions for effed up movies on what constitutes an effed up movie. Like, is Boy in the Striped Pajamas effed up because of it being just a horrible, like just a bad movie, or is it because of the content? That's the question. It has
In the internet, it's an epistemological crisis.
Yeah, like I'm just kind of like I'm looking at some of these. I'm like, yeah, they're just kind of horror movies. They're not really effed up. Yeah, I don't know. I got.
What does it mean to be effed up?
Like, it's. Oh, hold on.
Great question.
They got the directors. They got Exorcist 3.
Hell yeah! Is it the director's cut or the theatrical? Because apparently there's a big difference, and I don't know which one I watched.
Effed up movies has both.
Holy shit!
Ooh. They know what they're doing.
Yeah, it's great, honestly. 10 out of 10 on it's 10 out of 10 on effed up movies. They know what they're doing. All right, let's see. I wonder if they'll sponsor the podcast. This episode of Cinema
It's probably
brought
like
to you
some
by effedupmovies.com.
That'd be so
There's probably
great.
like some Danish like server is like hosting it.
Just one guy.
Yeah.
Oh, hold on. Not to get like they have an about page, so I'm going to read that.
Oh
for a
yeah.
second. All movies posted here are works of fiction, and no effed up stuff that is real will ever be posted unless it's part of a documentary. Effed up movies is a place where you can watch effed up cinema from around the world. This is a growing site in terms of content. While we are slow with our posts, we have thousands of movies we hope to post here eventually.
So they're basically just saying they don't do like snuff films, like
Yeah.
That's nice.
We are a few former moderators from forums, boards, and websites who have come together through our shared interest in the fucked up. Effed up. What the?
Oh my god.
Language.
They
Jesus.
said that.
Okay, this is gonna be my dream now on the podcast is to bring the moderators of effed up movies on the cemetery to talk to.
You guys have
Gotta do
saved this
that.
podcast.
Honestly, like clutch. Yeah. All right. Let's talk some Naked Lunch. We go in 3, 2, 1. And we're back with part 2 of episode 460 of Cinematary. In this part, we're going to continue our series on the films of David Cronenberg with 1991's Naked Lunch, written and directed by Cronenberg and based off of the book of the same name by William S. Burroughs. The film stars Peter Weller, Judy Davis, Ian Holm, Julian Sands, and Roy Scheider. Blank-faced bug killer Bill Lee and his dead-eyed wife Joan like to get high on Bill's pest poisons while lounging with beat poet pals. After meeting the devilish Dr. Benway, Bill gets a drug made from a centipede. Upon indulging, he accidentally kills Joan, takes orders from his typewriter turned cockroach, ends up in a constantly mutating Mediterranean city, and learns that his hip friends have published his work, which he doesn't remember writing.
You know, the regular.
Yeah, this happened to my friend, Corey one time. It's just, it's crazy. Filmmakers, including Stanley Kubrick and Anthony Balk, using a script from Brian Geisen, attempted to adapt Naked Lunch into a film, but were unsuccessful. In 1981, Cronenberg was interviewed by Omni during the release of Scanners in the United States and stated that he was interested in making a film based on Burroughs' novel. James Grauerholtz showed Cronenberg's films to Burroughs, and Cronenberg stated that Burroughs felt he was the only one who could properly make the film. The screenplay for Naked Lunch is based not only on Burroughs' novel, but also on other fiction by him and autobiographical accounts of his life. Cronenberg said it was necessary to, quote, throw the book away as a direct adaptation, would have been far too expensive, and, quote, would be banned in every country in the world. Yeah, Burroughs was involved with the writing of the film script and granted his blessing to the first draft in December 1989. This version opened the film with a short story from Burroughs' Exterminator. The shooting of Joan Lee is based on the 1951 death of Joan Vollmer, Burroughs' common law wife. Burroughs shot and killed Vollmer in a drunken game of William Tell at a party in Mexico City. He would later flee to the United States. Burroughs was convicted in absentia of homicide and sentenced to 2 years, which was suspended. Burroughs stated in the introduction to his book Queer that Joan's death was the starting point of his literary career, saying, quote, I am forced to the appalling conclusion that I would have never become a writer but for Joan's death. Cronenberg intended the film to be shot in Tangiers, but the Gulf War prevented him from filming in North Africa as they could not receive insurance. I read that part and it reminded me of the Arrested Development line of, I don't want to blame it all on 9/11, but it certainly didn't help. Cronenberg massively rewrote the script a few days later before filming due to being unable to shoot in Tangiers. The film, this is a big thing. The film required 50 bug typewriters, which tells you that there were 50 bug typewriters, just set loose in the world. The New York Times in 1992 said Naked Lunch, adapted by the dauntless David Cronenberg from William S. Burroughs' 1959 landmark novel, represents a remarkable meeting of the minds. It's hard to imagine another filmmaker who could delve so deeply into the monstrousness of Mr. Burroughs' vision, in the end coming up with a bona fide monster movie of his own. Yet while Mr. Cronenberg's ingenious approach to his material matches Mr. Burroughs' flair for the grotesque, it also shares the author's perfect nonchalance and his ice-cold wit. Seldom has a filmmaker offered his audience a more debonair invitation to go to hell. In 1992, the LA Times said David Cronenberg may have seemed like the perfect director to adapt William Burroughs' pop phantasmagoria Naked Lunch, which was published in 1959. The book presages much of what Cronenberg has done in the movies. It's clear as much of an influence on him as it has been for such directors as Nicholas Roeg or Ridley Scott. Its dope-drenched bughouse atmosphere with the dreamlike narrative spliced into glittery shards is tailor-made for a director who has attuned to the gloppiness of interior states as Cronenberg. And in 1992, Roger Ebert said, while I admired it in an abstract way, I felt repelled by the material on a visceral level. There is so much dryness, death, and despair here, and a life spinning itself out with no joy. On that note, let's talk a little bit about Naked Lunch. I think you mentioned it earlier, Michael, or at least you mentioned it off mic. I'm going to start with you since you read the novel leading up to watching the movie.
Yeah, a friend had given me this novel years and years ago, and so I used this as an excuse to read it first, and then I watched the movie. And the novel is not very much like the movie. As Cronenberg said, it would be very difficult to film without just making a pornographic film. Not just pornographic, but it is extraordinarily, it's like it's almost like Looney Tunes-esque in its like weird slapstick stuff. Like there's just all sorts of like body parts stretching and flying everywhere. And but that said, like the basic structure of the movie, where there's like a beginning that's set in something that kind of resembles the real world, and then that like goes into the interzone, which is like where it really disconnects from anything that we would recognize as reality, and then it kind of comes back into something that is kind of like the real world. Like that is basically from the novel. The interzone itself is from the novel. So it's more of like like inspired by the novel, I guess, than it is taken from the novel. But I really like this movie. I understood a lot more of what I was supposed to be getting out of it. Like once I started clocking that, like, oh, this is kind of sort of about William S. Burroughs as an author more so than it is like about Naked Lunch, because Naked Lunch is like the book is a really disjointed set of like vignettes that are really strange. Whereas in the movie, there's a real discernible narrative and development, because like I had read about him killing his wife and saying that like, well, that's how I became a writer. And so like once you get to the scene that's like fairly early on in the movie in which she's like, let's do our William Tell routine. And I was like, oh wow, are they really putting this in the movie? And like from there, it kind of clicked with me that, oh, okay, so this is like his journey as a writer. And in a weird way, it reminded me of a movie that came out right around this time, which is Barton Fink. And it kind of like Barton Fink, there's this like it's almost like the writer gets stuck in purgatory and is subjected to like increasingly strange things in this kind of purgatorial state. And in this movie, it's the freaking typewriter that comes alive, creates stuff when you type on it. And I don't know. I couldn't explain every part of this movie, but that was kind of the narrative I ended up holding on to through this. And I just kind of enjoyed the ride. Although the ending perplexed me, and maybe we can get to that later. But like for the most part, like I could hold on to this idea of like, oh yeah, it's this dude like trying to write in a place that is so strange that it's becoming impossible to get stuff done. I don't know. Yeah. That's kind of what I got out of it.
Reid, you said before we started recording that you were hoping that I would have a bunch of stuff in my fact sheet that could tell you what this movie was about. So now that I've read the fact sheet, do you have any better understanding of what the movie's about?
Well, I had not looked at all into William S. Burroughs' life. Like I didn't know any of that. So that is interesting and does help a little bit. But no, it doesn't. Overall, the fact sheet did not reveal too much about the movie to me. I felt like it was hard because I really struggled with this one. Like it feels like a movie I should really, really like. Like there's kind of like a neo-noir aspect to it that's really interesting. Like even just the shot and kind of the first section of the movie where he's sitting at the bar. I think he's just killed his wife and he's sitting at the bar, and then the bug appears. I forget the bug's name.
Yeah, it's a great shot because like there's like a human. Doesn't the human like lean forward or something, and then there's the bug, the bar stool two bar stools down.
And that shot alone is just so up my alley. Like that whole scene was so great that I was like, man, this is working for me. Like I'm really enjoying this. And then also just the creature design and however they do the practical effects to make the bugs look like this in this time period, and also like other movies around this time too that did a similar method of practical effects. I personally find it to be so unsettling. Like some of the most unsettling stuff on film, I think, like the Eraserhead baby, like just like that is like this type of effect really messes with me and always
we needed you last episode with The Fly.
I like The Fly a lot. Yeah, it's the same vibe. It's kind of, I don't know what exactly about it like disturbs me so much, but it does. So I felt like I should really like this movie, but I just didn't have much of a way into the story, and I was unfortunately relating most like Roger Ebert's kind of admiration, but like repelled by it. I'm like, I'm not I did not enjoy it as much as I feel like I should based on like elements that like I would normally like. And like I typically like Cronenberg. And I thought oh my God, I'm blinking on the actor's name, performer's name.
Peter Weller.
Yeah, I thought he was terrific and plays that kind of like protagonist or however you want to characterize him, plays that so well in this. But I just really had a hard way and had a hard time like getting into this movie, I feel like.
Yeah, I probably leaned more toward you as well. Like, I kind of went in and was, at this point, I'm a Cronenberg expert. I've watched two of his movies now, and so I kind of was just like going in like, just take what it gives you and just kind of run with that. But even that, I was really struggling, like, because yeah, there's nothing like, and I think that's kind of the point. Like, there's nothing that you're really supposed to latch onto. It's very like, there's something kind of there, and you grab it, and it just get like, because that's what the character is dealing with. Also, like, he kind of grabs onto
Yeah.
something that, like, becomes a bug thing. In a cage, killing the other person. Like that stuff happens. And like, so I think that's the point, but I don't know, like maybe, yeah, maybe if I was like more into William S. Burroughs and could really like kind of like get on that energy, maybe um I just didn't have any patience tonight. I don't know. Like, again, like I didn't hate it, and I didn't really hate it at all. But like, yeah, I was really having problems trying to connect with it. And there were parts that like that I've become accustomed to now with the Cronenberg movies, where yeah, it's like you were talking about these like the practical effects come into place, and you're just like, God, like I'm thinking of like just the first time he like runs into the bug, who
With the
eventually is like the typewriter bug.
with the talking orifice. That oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
So
And then
disgusting.
well, just that whole scene, and then when he's like crushing the butt, like you're just like, what is going? Like I'm just like, it's just so like we talked about it last episode with the fly. Like it's so visceral. Like there is something like affecting about that. If you had it like if you had some kind of like VFX work or like CGI work, and you had like it wouldn't have had the same like palpable like tangible effect that like having just that practical design gives you. But yeah, like you're just like um, and I don't know. Yeah, I just it was kind of. I think I'm the same way. Like I admired parts of it, but I just couldn't really couldn't sink in and be like, yeah, this is I'm vibing with this.
Maybe reading the book gave me more insight than I thought. Really vibed with this, and I'm thinking now another connection with the book that um, I guess primed me for this is like the at least like nominal conceit of the book is William S. Burroughs and a lot of the beat poets and a lot of people in general, like jazz musicians and like a lot of people were just like strung out on heroin for a lot of the 1950s. Like that was just like a fact. And like at one point, William S. Burroughs lived in Tangiers when it was kind of like an autonomous zone, or not exactly an autonomous zone, but like it was still owned by I don't remember which colonial power owned Tangiers, but it was like this like international city in the middle of Morocco. And so like he's like just palling around like Tangiers, like drifting in and out of like drug stupor and just having these like bizarre encounters with like all these people like in his real life. And so like the Naked Lunch is supposed to be capturing a little bit of that. Like the Interzone is supposed to be kind of like that. And like I think that this movie is a little bit of that as well. Like this kind of, I mean, obviously like the bug powder and the centipede stuff is like drugs. And I think that like the cadence of this movie is like the cadence of like drifting in and out of like being like completely high all the time, and the things that you like come into contact with and your like desperation to like get another fix. And I mean, maybe that's just like a framework I'm like imposing from the book, but like there is like some really interesting stuff later on in the movie with Dr. Benway and like how he keeps hunting down like where does the centipede stuff come from and stuff like that. And that's really strange and gross, but also in a way like maps onto this like strange like obsession that he and Joan get with like the bug powder and the centipede stuff. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. No. Oh, to answer your question before, everybody staked a claim in Tangier at one point or another.
Yeah. Well, and then
England,
Morocco was
France,
like,
Spain.
screw this. We are going to declare
Yeah.
independence and you guys don't get Tangiers. And
Yeah, exactly.
William S. Burroughs was like tangentially involved in some like liberation militias and stuff like that. And then he kind of like flaked out on them. And so like that's like in the book too. And I feel like there's like little rumblings of that in the movie. Like there is like definitely like violence in the movie, like although it seems a little more like a mob than like a militia. But
yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know whether it's reading the book or just being a little bit more. That's like I said before, like being more familiar with Burroughs as like a writer, and kind of understanding like the wavelength, the plane that he's kind of operating on. I guess I just didn't, since I'm not super familiar with him. Like I just I couldn't really like lock in on that. And so I think if I watched it again, I might like it a little bit more, just because I would understand like this is the wavelength we're operating on. But yeah, I don't know, like even like like again, it wasn't like that I was struggling like this is weird, this is too weird. I kind of was like it's gonna be. I don't know. I just like I couldn't even like latch on to the weirdness because like it's the same way. Like, it's kind of like what we talked about with like The Fly last episode, where like you get to the point where old Brumblefly just becomes like so like grotesque and so just like you can't even like it's not even entertaining anymore because he's just so gross. Like I felt like this movie is operating on like the last 15 minutes of The Fly in terms of just likability. Like for the entire
no jaws come off.
Yeah, for the entire like hour 50 runtime. Like it's just you're just because you're just kind of like the Peter Weller, like the Burroughs stand-in character that he's playing is tough. It's just kind of tough to latch on to. Joan just doesn't really offer much. She gets shot twice,
I wasn't sure what to make of that, to be honest.
They start dry humping at one point, and her housemaid loses her mind, and a butt plug, a butt bug comes out and like becomes a part of things like that. You're like, like at that point, I'm just like, all right, that makes sense. Yeah, I don't know. Like there's just kind of absurd stuff, but not absurd stuff to the point that I was just like, this is wild. I'm having a great time. It was more just like, all right, another bug. Like, the one bug's eating the other bug. I'm like, geez, like, come on.
And to me, it feels a little bit like, maybe you'll have a better sense of this too, having just watched some Cronenberg films as well. Like it's been, I guess I haven't seen any of his work since, his one last year, Crimes of the Future, which I really, really loved. But it's feels like the movie Cronenberg like should make, but maybe like he fits it all completely. Like it made sense for him to make this movie, but I don't know if it's necessarily saying kind of maybe the interesting things that he says about like our bodies and about the way we consume as he is in other movies. Like the content is there. Like it's about like the drug use, like you're saying, Michael. It's about that state of that mind state as well. The state of mind. And but in so many of his movies he's dealing with like the way as the world's evolving, we're just finding ways to like either destroy or change or alter or like just like our bodies are evolving, but like devolving, like all this simultaneously. And I mean, maybe that is here, maybe there is something going on with that. I don't know. It's just like I just had such a hard time, like on a metaphorical level too, getting into this. And I feel like Cronenberg's not necessarily like a subtle director. Like it's not, you normally don't have too hard of a time understanding like what what he's kind of getting at. But
yeah, I don't know. I think the reason we chose this, if I'm remembering right in our Slack conversations, is that there's kind of like a subgenre of David Cronenberg movies that he doesn't make too many of these, but is definitely like a trend in his films, which is that he does have a penchant for this kind of like postmodern literature. Like he's got this, which is obviously a William S. Burroughs adaptation. He's got Crash, which is a J.G. Ballard adaptation. He's got Cosmopolis, which is Don DeLillo. And there's maybe one more that I'm blanking on, but like has this real affinity for that strain of literature, and he adapts them every once in a while, and they all feel kind of interesting and not in the same vein as some of his others. I think Crash like maybe fits the best in with his other films and like those kind of themes you're talking about. But Cosmopolis, which I've not seen in years, but that's a weird one and takes place almost entirely in a car with Robert Pattinson like talking at the camera a lot of times and stuff. And I don't know, I think in some of his other movies like Crimes of the Future or like Existence, there is that kind of, you can tell that he's also interested in postmodern literature. He's got like this like William Gibson like cyberpunk thing going on, which is like adjacent to that. And I don't know, like I don't really know what to make of that, except that I tend to like those books too, and I think it's cool. And maybe that's just the missing piece.
Yeah, I think I also kind of feel the same way where I guess this is a completely different wavelength from what we've engaged with so far for the two movies that we've done in the series, where you don't have that necessarily connection with something affecting the body and like the body's response to that, like like the Peter Weller character, like I don't feel like it has the same effect as like the characters in Rabid or The Fly, like where like it's just kind of about this disintegration of the body. It's more, I mean, I don't know, I guess maybe disintegration of the mind, like maybe that's where kind of the drug addled state comes from, but it's almost like,
because he's so disaffected. As in those other movies, people are like really involved. Like the Fly is like a melodrama in terms of its emotional engagement, whereas this movie, a loved one also dies twice, and it's kind of like abstractly horrific, but the main character just kind of takes it in stride, which is not something that happens in the other Cronenberg movies that you're talking about.
Yeah, and so I think that's maybe where maybe the disconnect go, and that's why like again, like I didn't hate the movie at all, and like maybe revisiting it and kind of thinking in that, like kind of approaching it in that way rather than again, like Grace mentioned last week, like these are the only two I've seen, so I'm like it isn't really giving me The Fly or Rabid vibes. That's the only one I kind of work off of. And so maybe like kind of coming in with that perspective in mind could kind of shift shift how I see this movie, because there is, I mean, there are like a lot of the trails that'll kind of take you on, because it'll just like go off on. It's a lot of like, it's kind of a tangent movie. Like you'll just kind of go off into a world, like can be kind of entertaining. Like there is like like I mentioned before, when the Joan character, you meet her again, and they start like kissing, and they're like literally just like rubbing each other on the floor, and then like the cockroach typewriter becomes like this, like this looks like the alien from Alien that has a butt now, and like it's also great because like they start kissing, and there's just like this phallic thing coming up, and you're just
my
like,
god,
you're just like, what the hell is going on? Like you're like, now we're here. Like this.
Well, we've not even talked about, there's a second type of typewriter where you like reach your hand into the thing's mouth, and like that thing has a little phallic like angler worm looking thing there that'll like squirt at you. It's really really nasty.
You have the one typewriter eating the other typewriter, and while yelling like, you made me do this. like some of that stuff. Like I was entertained by that because you're just like, what the hell's going on, man? I was entertained with Roy Scheider. Like he was really committed.
Yeah.
He's always great. Like I was laughing in the like near the end of the movie when you have like the housekeeper woman who like seems to be the person behind this whole narcotics thing, and then like just rips herself apart, and it's Roy Scheider, and you're just like, I was like thinking to myself, I'm like my letterbox review is going to be like when you're out on a date and she rips, she starts to rip her face off, and it's Roy Scheider. Um, like that would have been jar. He handled that a lot better than I would have. I would have been very jarring. But yeah, like I don't know, like some of that stuff sustains me because it's just so like weird and outlandish and just strange. And I'm kind of like, all right, like this is kind of fun. I just need some I need some connective tissue between my weird, insane moments that kind of give me a chuckle every once in a while. That's all.
I thought this movie had some really good surface pleasures beyond like the prosthetics and like animatronics or whatever's going on with the effects. Like the Howard Shore's back for the score, and I thought the score was really good.
Really
it's
great
got like
score.
those Ornette Coleman pieces in it too, which are very cool. And then two, the cinematography I thought was beautiful. Like it's really shadowy and like rich. I saw somewhere on Letterboxd where they said like the plot feels like David Lynch, but the cinematography looks like an Indiana Jones movie, and I kind of like know what it meant in that regard. Like it looks really neat. Just the way the cinematography is. Anyway, like I really dug just those two aspects. Even when I didn't know what was going on, they would have like that music is swelling, and I don't know. I thought that was neat.
Yeah, no, it looks gorgeous, and like just kind of like that. Whenever it shifts to Tangier, or like it's not Tangier, but like
The
that
interzone.
equivalent, the inner zone. That it does kind of it kind of creates this whole like this kind of this world that feels very just kind of like interesting and fantastical in a way. I mean, like you have the fantastical elements, but just very interesting. Like it feels very different, and like you're kind of just engaged in the backgrounds and the settings.
Is the
Shadowy people
Michael
with hats.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Michael, is is like the secret agent plot line, is that from the book too?
I kind of like it's just the plot is so difficult to parse in this book because it was meant so it's like all these little vignettes that are meant to be able to be read in any order you want, but there's like recurring characters through the vignettes. And so like one of the characters is basically like a police informant. And so he's like constantly touching base with like these shadowy authority figures. And then there is like conspiracy stuff going on too. In the book, there's probably wisely cut by Cronenberg, but there's this like kind of like nefarious organization running the interzone called Islam Incorporated, and it's like this like capitalist enterprise that's like integrated with like something with Islam. And so there's like that kind of conspiracy angle too. And then there's like US government spooks occasionally too, which I think William S. Burroughs in real life had run-ins with. So there's like all sorts of different like shadowy figures. There's not like one person who's like running around. And even then, like what I've described to you is like patched from like all these different just random stuff. And like Dr. Benway's in here, who is like a constant figure throughout. And there's like all these conversations about like, oh, I heard Dr. Benway does this or that. And so he's like a mysterious figure in that regard too. But the movie is far more coherent than the book is, or at least I thought so. The way you guys are talking about the movie, I kind of felt about the book when I read it, where I was like, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be getting out of this.
I feel comfortable in feeling like I like Reid and I are reacting probably the way you're supposed to. Like I feel like it's kind
Yeah.
of like what we talked about in the Fly, where you had the scene where Brumble flies, and the guy's watching it on the TV, and it's just like I think that's again like I think that's how Cronenberg wants you to watch his movies. He wants you to come like, "Oh, what the fuck's going on?"
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think this movie is like not successful at what it's trying to do. So kind of same what you're saying. Like I think it is doing exactly what it's trying to do.
Yeah. He understands the assignment every time.
For
Yeah.
sure.
Or just kind of makes up the assignment and goes, "This is the
Yeah.
assignment now." In terms of, I know you said it's been a while since you've seen Cosmopolis, and then there's Crash. Like in terms of like these kind of Cronenberg going in veering in a different direction from like the typical body horror that you're used to, how would you rank this one in terms out of the three of those?
I think I like this one the best. People really love Crash, and I like Crash, but I probably need to see it again. Maybe reading the book it's based on would help me too. But I remember getting stuff out of Crash that a lot of other people, that was not the same as what other people said, and I was wondering if I had misunderstood the movie. But I enjoyed Crash. I don't remember very much about Cosmopolis except being kind of confused. So I don't know. This is my favorite, probably just by virtue of being the freshest in my mind and being the one that I felt like I understood the most the first watch. But I don't know. Andrew's a huge fan of Crash, so you should. It's worth a watch, I think. And it's not like this where it's like super incomprehensible. It's like a very straightforward plot.
Yeah. Well, Andrew's going to be existing with us next episode, so we can figure it out then. Any final thoughts on Naked Lunch before we wrap it up? I mean, like I've said, like confused. It kind of boggled me a bit. Didn't boggle me, but it just kind of went over me a little bit. But it made it. Like I'd give it another chance.
This would be one too. Like I would probably jump at the chance to see it in a theater with a crowd.
Yeah.
Like a crowd that is kind of into it. I wouldn't want to see with people that like have no idea what they're getting into at all. But like crowd that is kind of into the idea of it, like I think would be super fun.
Like if
People
you
dressed
walked
up
in,
as bugs.
if you like walked in, if you
That's
walked
too much
into
for me.
like to Taylor Swift the Eras tour and then Naked Lunch started playing and that crowd was responding to it.
All the children and teens.
Yeah, just going, why? What?
I have two final thoughts. One is that my library had the Criterion Blu-ray, and that looks awesome. And then, so if you're gonna try to see it on home media, like Criterion did a good job with it. The second is I loved the opening and closing credits. The like colorful little shapes zipping around, like that was cool.
Yeah.
I was
of a piece with the 1950s, I guess.
I was thinking about that. That reminds me. I was thinking about that while watching. I've been like watching Cheers lately, and just banger like opening tune and opening set.
Yeah,
like
you
why
gotta watch
why in general do we go away from that stuff? Like a nice little overture opening is just like the bomb, and like now we're like too good for it. Now we're in prestige.
I think the real reason is that commercials took more and more of the time of a 30-minute block of television, so screenwriters had to cut stuff.
I know, but like that's stupid.
It is stupid.
That's
especially
stupid.
now that we're all on streaming and there's no blocks
Yeah.
of TV we got to fit stuff into.
Like I was talking with somebody a couple weeks ago about was it Oppenheimer? Or maybe it was Killer Moon. Killers of the Flower Moon. Yeah, it was before Killers of the Flower Moon came out. We were talking about it being 3.5 hours. And he was excited about seeing it, but he was like, like, why don't they just like put an intermission in the middle of this? Like because he's like, this is the point of the intermission. One, you can go to the bathroom and stuff, like that's good. But then also like he's like, you'll get in the longer movies. He's like, I got no problem with a long movie, but like what if you're halfway through the movie and you're like, who the hell is this person? Who the hell is this character? Who's, what's going on here? And he's like, the
Yeah.
part of the intermission is you got, however many minutes, you can go out to the lobby real quick while you're going to the bathroom and stuff and be like, hey, what the hell's up with the guy with the hat?
Did y'all ever see the roadshow version of Hateful Eight? Did y'all watch Hateful Eight like that? That had an intermission.
Yeah,
that was
an
fun.
intermission.
Yeah,
because that's just another one. Like just add an intermission in there. I mean, you're already banking it in for 3.5 hours, technically like 4 hours with like the the shitty previews they showed us before. So like I don't know.
Yeah,
just try
I'm very
make it easier on people. Yeah. That's the takeaway to take from this episode. We need opening titles. It can be movies and TV, and we need intermissions. And that's if you vote for me in 2024 as your president, I will enact that.
My God, he's got my vote.
That is an agenda I can get behind.
Yeah. All right, well, that'll wrap up this episode of Cinematary. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cinematary, on Instagram and Twitter at Cinematary, and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Cinematary, where we list all the movies that we talked about in this episode. If you'd like to support the show, head over to patreon.com/Cinematary. It can be $1, $5, whatever. We appreciate the support, and who knows, we'll probably be coming up soon on a Patreon pick series, and it's always fun to torture us with stuff. But thank you to our patrons, Cam, Candace, and Ron Hayes, Teresa Marsathi, and Tyler Chandler. Thank you so much for your patronage. Next week next episode, we're going to continue our David Cronenberg series with what year did this Existence? 1999. 1999's Existence.
It's like the anti-Matrix.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Willem Dafoe is in this. I'm honestly surprised Willem Dafoe wasn't in Naked Lunch. He seemed made for this movie.
When the bug
I thought
first
he was
talked,
the voice
I thought
of the bug.
Yeah,
me too.
I had to look it up, and I was very disappointed that it wasn't. I did not know who the guy that was the voice of the bug.
Yeah, I don't know. I was just like, how'd you miss out on this, Willem? Like this.
He was
like
probably working with.
He's pretty young.
Yeah, he was probably blacklisted for being Jesus at this point.
It happens, we've all been there.
Yeah.
Until then, we'll talk to you next week. Thanks for listening.